I didn't know how to write a novel, and and I honestly didn't think I could write a novel. My wife has been telling me for 20 years, you would be great at writing novels. And I never believed her.
Were you a novel reader? Did you read novels yourself?
Yes.
Any type of genre?
Yeah. Any type of genre, but particularly great mysteries.
Okay.
Great crime fiction, because there's such great writing in that genre.
So you knew novels, you just hadn't written one.
Exactly. I love that world, but I didn't think I had the chops for it. I didn't know the military world at all. In terms of writing the novel, this is not the kind of thing where you write an outline and go sell it to a publisher. They give you an advance and then you write the book. That happens with business books, but not this thing. This thing was completely in the red by the time we finished it, because we didn't earn dime one until
leap of faith.
Yeah, total leap of faith. There were many more reasons that a reasonable person would have had for saying no. So there is an unreasonableness, like you mentioned, entrepreneurs and business people, taking an entrepreneurial leap of faith, isn't an act of total folly, because if it's total folly, really truly foolish, then you're just going to waste your time. Sure. But there is a healthy element of folly in every great new idea, simply because it hasn't been done before.
Welcome to the Rockstars Rocking podcast, powered by Voluntary Disruption, a show dedicated to people who are crushing their business and life goals. These are bite-sized conversations with leading rock stars in their respective industry who are pumped to share their story to help drive you to the next level. So, are you ready to rock? Speaking of rock stars, here's your host, Eric Silverman.
Hey, rock stars, welcome back to another episode of Rockstars Rocking, the podcast that only has the rock stars crushing both business, personal, and life on each and every week. I am so proud and so excited to have on this week John David Mann. For those of you that don't know John is an award-winning, best-selling author, co-author, ghostwriting author of more than 30 books worldwide, and he's sold more than 30 million. That's aggressive, but you will be there soon. He sold more than 3 million copies, should be 30 million, of all of his books combined, including more than 1 million copies of the book that he and my friend Bob Burg have co-authored, The Go-Giver, and the collaborative series, The Go-Giver Sell More, Go-Giver Leader, and the Go-Giver Influencer. And I'm super, super fired up and excited to talk a lot about today the first book that he's written, a thriller with his partner Brandon Webb, called Steal Fear, which will be out in the general public, released in the middle of July. So if that's not an introduction, flubbed and everything, welcome John David Mann. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you. It's great to be here. We've had to work hard at nailing down this date. We kept having roadblocks thrown up in our way, but here we are. We persevered.
If there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So John, we're going to get to the new book. I want to talk a lot about that because I'm super pumped. I just started reading it. Don't give me any secrets. Don't give me anything. I no spoiler alert on this podcast.
I know nothing.
But you've had an interesting career, man. A lot, quite candidly, a lot of people might say that you've taken a back seat when it comes to your books and writing for a lot of your books. Most certainly, in my opinion, the Go-Giver series of books, which have had a profound impact on my career and my life, to be very, very honest and sincere. And that's a good thing. I love this series of books. Can you talk about, when it comes to any of your books, what it means to be a co-writer versus a ghostwriter, and how these things come about?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think everyone's familiar with the idea of a ghostwriter. So you have someone, you have a celebrity, let's say, who has their life story come out in a book form, and they may be an amazing person with lots of skills and talents and accomplishments, but they're not particularly writers. So somebody who has that skill set collaborates with them and does the writing part. That's ghostwriting. And frequently their name may appear on the cover of the book in small letters or not at all. And so I've done a bunch of those. I've written other people's memoirs, other people's life stories, women, men, conservative, liberal, politicians, business people, all kinds of people, including my Navy SEAL buddy, Brandon Webb, former Navy SEAL sniper, Brandon Webb, now an entrepreneur in the private sector. Brandon and I collaborated on his memoir, The Red Circle, back in 2009. It came out in 2012. And that was the first of what has turned out to be a long and fruitful partnership of books between Brandon and me. That's ghostwriting, where really my job is to kind of channel somebody else's life. It's sort of like being a film actor starring as Freddie Mercury or Margaret Thatcher or, Mr. Rogers or whomever. You put on the person's life, mindset, experience, outlook, like a suit of clothes, and then you stand up and you do stuff. So my job as a ghostwriter is to sit down and write as if it were my story, but it's actually somebody else's story that I put on like a suit of clothes. It's a really interesting task. Then there's the co-authored books, like the Go Giver series. Now that isn't me channeling Bob Burg. That's Bob and me, our combined experiences, outlooks, and so forth. Bob and I mesh really well. We have very, very different temperaments, experiences, backgrounds, but we mesh really well. So those books are kind of we're like the co-parents of those books. The difference is with the first, I'm trying to, like I said, channel somebody else. With the second, it's like you create almost a third person. You take me and Bob, put us in a barrel, mix us up, and it creates this thing called the Go Giver universe. So there's 4 books now. Actually, there's a 5th Go Giver book coming out next spring, the Go Giver Marriage, which I wrote not with Bob, but with my wife.
Wow.
So that's my first collaboration with her in book form. So that's really, really a fun process.
Oh man, I'm excited for that.
So Brandon and I started out with his memoir, and then we did a bunch of other military memoirs, Among Heroes and The Killing School and various things. And then we kind of went into the area of business books and personal development books. We wrote a book called Total Focus, which is like bringing the principles from special operations field to business and civilian life and in life. And then a book called Mastering Fear, which is the same idea. And now we've finally done something we've talked about for over a decade, which is we've become a collaborative crime writing team. And this is the first in a series of thrillers. This is Steel Fear. It's going to be followed by Cold Fear, and then a bunch of other fears as the years go by.
Wow. That's neat. Well, I told you right before we started recording that, I'm just so into these types of books, and the new book, Steel Fear, available everywhere books are sold on July 13th, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, you name it. But I love these types of books because it just takes me out of the real world and puts me into a different area. I don't even know how to explain it. That's what it's supposed to do if you think about it. And to me, my immediate thought, and you would have this thought, anybody, if you just read the back for 6 seconds, it's a movie waiting to happen. It's a TV show waiting to happen. And we'll get to that in a second. But let me ask you a question when it comes to the new book. How did you meet Brandon?
Yeah, Brandon, this is right around the time that Captain Phillips was captured. His ship was captured by Somalian pirates. Everybody knows the story now because he turned into Tom. Yeah, he turned into Tom Hanks. But back when he wasn't Tom Hanks yet, he was just Captain Phillips. The country was riveted by the scene of 3 SEAL snipers with 3 coordinated shots, like synchronized swimmers, taking out 3 pirates. And my literary agent, who had shepherded the Go Giver books and done a lot of other books with me, she was watching TV with her sister, and CNN was interviewing a guy who had trained Navy SEAL snipers, and he was describing the kind of training that these 3 snipers would have had. And he sounded fascinating. And my agent turned to his sister and said, I want that guy as a client. Why can't I have that guy as a client? This is a Friday or a Saturday. Monday morning, that guy walked into our office and said, I need an agent. I want to write my life story. And that was Brandon.
Wow.
He had, after coming back from Afghanistan, his platoon was one of the first in after 9/11. And after coming back from Afghanistan, he was recruited to revamp the SEAL sniper training program, which is reputed to be the most difficult training program on the planet Earth. And so he and a buddy, whose name was Eric, completely revamped the sniper training program to bring it into the 21st century. And so that's why he was on CNN, but he wanted to tell a story. And so she contacted me and said, look, I know you don't do this kind of book. This is like not your thing. Mr. Go-Giver, Mr. Leadership, Mr. mild-mannered, Clark Kent, right? And she said, but this guy needs a writer. He's a good writer, but he needs a real, a professional writer. Would you take a look? I said, of course. I took a look. I looked at one page of what he drafted, and I said, I am in, man. I am totally in. So we met on the phone. We started corresponding, email. One of our very first conversations, he said to me back in 2009, he said, would you ever be interested in writing a thriller, like a novel, a full novel? I said, tell me more. Because he had this experience on the USS Abraham Lincoln on this aircraft carrier, much like the one that's behind me here, when they were just integrating women into the Navy and combat roles on ships. And it was a kind of culture shock. And there was a serial sexual predator on the ship. This guy who would sneak into the women's showers and put his hand in and flip off the lights and then run in the dark and grab somebody. And it never escalated to the point of physical harm or full out rape, but it was sexual predation, and it was creepy and it was horrifying. And it kind of cast a pall of terror over the whole ship. And the leadership of the ship was completely unprepared to handle anything like that. They were not equipped for something, a complex crime. And Brandon thought at the time, well, what if these were murders? And that's where the idea for the book came from. The guy did this like 6, 7, 8 times, and they never caught him. So we decided to write a book about it and catch him. That's what the deal is.
That's cool. Well, it's funny. You read my notes because my next question was going to be, where'd the idea of the book come from? And, a lot of times ideas come from actual stories, and then you adapt them. So that's neat. People often say that new ideas for stories, for books, for businesses, for that matter, entrepreneurs get when two unrelated ideas collide, and suddenly you get a new, oh, no one's done this. And so we had this idea of the serial killer on an aircraft carrier. Hadn't been done that we know of ever. That was floating in our universe for years and years and years. And I started thinking about who would be the hero of that story, who would be the main character. And for a couple of years, I kind of thought about that. And I started forming this picture of this extremely traumatized, damaged guy who had a traumatic event happen in his childhood and had some very difficult experiences in wartime that he's just come from, dropped onto this ship like a stranger, right? Dropped onto the ship for nobody knows what reason. And I started seeing that guy and the collision of that damaged character and the serial killer on the aircraft carrier. Those two collided and was like, okay, now this thing is real. And that's when the book took shape. So this was a long process in development. Like the idea was many, many, many years ago. And obviously it's going to take quite a while to write a book like this. You already said earlier to me, and I'll repeat, what did you say? Something like this was 150,000 words that you were able to reduce quite a bit?
Yeah, well, I thought the manuscript was finished, because I've never written a novel. And writing a novel is very, very different from writing, say, a business book or a memoir or even a parable like The Go-Giver. I often call parables like The Go-Giver like miniature novels, and that's fine to say, and there's a lot of truth to it. But writing a full-fledged complex novel is like it. It's like I've been walking up and down hills all my life, and suddenly I'm climbing, the Himalayas. And so it was ferociously intimidating and difficult. It took 1.5 years to write the book. And I thought it was done. And we brought it to our agent. And she said, "This is great. Of course, it has to be completely rewritten. It's like you gotta take out 50,000 words." I was like,
Oh man.
So we did. It went from about 150 to 103,000. Basically, every third word had to go out. We took out whole characters, took out whole chapters. Just
wow.
Yeah, but every, and I found this to be also true in smaller books, in nonfiction books, in blog posts, in all kinds of venues of writing. The more I took out, it's like the clearer and cleaner and more focused it got.
Totally.
Almost like when you clean your attic in your house, in your garage, and all of a sudden you go, "Oh, right, this is where I live. This is my life," Yeah, so it was worth it. It was worth the journey.
That's awesome. So talk to us about, I mentioned a couple minutes ago that that I totally, first thing I thought of was I got to watch this movie. I got to watch this this TV show. And I was just joking with you kind of sort of when we first came on before we hit record, and tell everybody what you told me.
Yeah, well, it's actually in development. By the time we were in the publication process, it was in development as a streaming limited TV series. And I have to add that in development is Hollywood language for what you and I would call, like, is it going to happen? We don't know. Maybe. It's a very big maybe. So what that looks like is there is a writer of the TV series. He's a phenomenal writer. Brandon and I participated in the selection process, and we were a bunch of writers. We actually had conversations with a range of producers. There were people who wanted to make it into a movie, a theatrical release movie. There were people who wanted to do. There were a lot of different people in play, and we went with a guy that we really clicked with, who was a seminal force in all the Jason Bourne flicks and the Jason Bourne TV series as well. So that's phenomenal. Good company. Yeah, seriously. He immediately said, "This is like the next Jason Bourne." Hey, I'll go with that. That's pretty good. That's pretty nice thought. So it's being developed. A pilot has been written. There is a network who has bought the rights to it, who has optioned it. Whether that will turn into a full-fledged produced TV series that comes to the viewing public, it is still an open question. We obviously hope so.
Well, I mean, like I said, I love these types of thriller type books and shows and movies. My wife and I are super into it, just like, hundreds of millions of other people around the world, if not billions. And another thing that came to mind immediately, Jason Bourne, but is Tom Clancy and the Jack Ryan series and all of the movies that have come from that over the years, as well as the now streaming on Amazon series of Jack Ryan and so forth and so on. So, let me ask you, when it comes to that, does the show coming about have anything to do with how the book performs and does in the market?
That's a great question. And I can't honestly say I know the answer. I would assume yes. I mean, I would assume that if the book, takes off out of the bookshelves and it hits the New York Times bestseller list and everyone's talking about it, that would be certainly motivation for the executives at the network to say, I don't know, we should do this.
Sure.
Something interesting about Steel Fear that I credit Brandon for this because he had the initial idea, but it is a military thriller, but it's also a serial killer thriller. Mm-hmm. It's two genres, and the thing that's kind of sweet about that is that if you're a fan of military books, like you mentioned, Tom Clancy, right? If you're a fan of Tom Clancy, if you're a fan of military-based thrillers with a lot of military details and military context, then obviously this book fits that slot. If, on the other hand, you're a fan of Jack Reacher, or you're a fan of Elvis Cole, or you're a fan of any of these other popular crime figures who are civilians, Jack Reacher used to be in the Army, okay, but still, he's in the civilian world. It fits that too. And you don't have to have a military background to enjoy the book. You don't have to be a fan of all the loose cannon Ronin type characters. So it kind of straddles two worlds. And you would think that would also make for a very attractive viewership on television. And we'll see. You mentioned something. You said that a book like this, you love it because it's a way of escaping from your world. It kind of takes you out of your world. And I think
that's what I meant to say. I couldn't get those words out, but that's why I leave it to the writer. Yes.
Well, here's what I think, and here's what I hope. For me, a great story, let's say a great movie or a great TV series. My wife and I are in the middle of watching The Sinner right now, phenomenal series. The same thing was true of the Queen's Gambit we watched earlier this year. A great series like that, or a great movie, to me, it takes you out of your world. But what it does more specifically is it engages you. It really engages you. And it engages you, hopefully, in a way that it takes you out of your world. And then when you go back into your world, you bring pieces with you. You bring Jack Ryan's ingenuity. You bring, if you watch The Shawshank Redemption, who doesn't love that movie? You bring
favorite.
The way that Morgan Freeman has no hope, is a hopeless man who discovers the possibility of having hope again. You bring that back into your world, even though you're not in prison. You weren't put away for a crime you did or didn't commit. You're living your ordinary life, but you bring pieces of that with you. So that, to me, is the ultimately, we hope that to be the value of a book like Steel Fear. Yeah, it's entertainment, takes you out of your world, engages you for hours and hours. It's a big book. But then when you go about your life, there's a piece of Finn, the hero, that you bring with you, and there's a piece of Monica, the helicopter pilot, that you bring with you, and hopefully it gives you even tools to go about your life in a more powerful way. Anyway, it's my aspiration.
I like how earlier you said you were I guess it was an agent reached out and said, hey, I got an idea for you. I know you've never done it before. Would you take a look at it? So number one lesson, right? Because a lot of folks listening to my podcast here are business folks too. So the number one lesson here is you embraced it. The first words out of your mouth were, I'll take a look. You didn't say yes. You didn't say no. You said, I'm open-minded, basically, right? Let's take a look. And then lesson two is that you were able to immediately, after reading one page, know that you were in. But that lesson, to me, in my opinion, is if it wasn't for you having that open mind, you would never have been opened up to a whole new world of writing that you had literally, I don't want to use the word ignored, but you had not been exposed to. Would you agree?
I would agree. And not only had I not been exposed, I had not participated, but also there were some compelling reasons to say no. There were some compelling reasons not to even entertain the idea of Brandon's memoir, and then further on, particularly the novel. First off, I had no military experience. Now, when you write a military memoir, the military readership is very particular. The crime readership, I think, is a lot more forgiving. I mean, maybe with all the interest in pathology, people want you to get all the details of the autopsy right, but with the military readership, man, if you don't get the caliber right, you don't get the rank right, the way different ranks address each other, you don't get all that stuff right, they just they discard you like yesterday's trash. So it's very unforgiving. What do I know about the military life? Nothing. So first off, I had that complete vast chasm of ignorance on my part. I didn't know how to write a novel, and I honestly didn't think I could write a novel. My wife has been telling me for 20 years, you would be great at writing novels. And I never believed her.
Were you a novel reader? Did you read novels yourself?
Yes.
Any type of genre?
Yeah. Any type of genre, but particularly great mysteries.
Okay.
Great crime fiction. Because there's such great writing in that genre.
So you knew novels, you just hadn't written one.
Exactly. I love that world, but I didn't think I had the chops for it. I didn't know the military world at all. In terms of writing the novel, this is not the kind of thing where you write an outline and go sell it to a publisher. They give you an advance and then you write the book. That happens with business books, but not this thing. This thing was completely in the red by the time we finished it, because we didn't earn dime one until
leap of faith.
Yeah, total leap of faith. There were many more reasons that a reasonable person would have had for saying no. So there is an unreasonableness. Like you mentioned, entrepreneurs and business people, taking an entrepreneurial leap of faith, isn't an act of total folly, because if it's total folly, really truly foolish, then you're just going to waste your time. Sure. But there is a healthy element of folly in every great new idea. simply because it hasn't been done before, or you haven't done it before, or or whatever. So yeah, I agree. Got to be open. The greatest things in my life, the Go Giver series has been one of the great blessings in my life. My wife, another great blessing in my life. There have been a number of great blessings in my life. Not one of them occurred as the result of my plan.
I think that's a life lesson, though, that we all experience, right? I mean, think about that. And I love how you said you had every reason to say no.
Yes.
And yet you read that page and you had one big reason to say yes, and you embraced it with open arms. And that was before you knew you'd be in the red, before you finished the book. Probably didn't know what you didn't know. Let's just be honest.
It's interesting at that time. So the Go Giver came out at the beginning of 2008, actually the last couple of days, 2007. And it was my first mainstream book, published book. I'd done some projects before, but there was, not through mainstream publishers. So actually my second book, but it was the first book that went big. That was 2008. At the end of 2008, as everybody knows, the economy collapsed.
Right.
The world blew up. Everything imploded. And over the next year or so, advances. Now, I mentioned that often with nonfiction books, you'll write an outline, maybe a sample chapter or two or three, some chapters. You kind of prepare a package that says, this is the book I plan to write, and here's why it's going to do well, and here's who I am, and here's what I expect.
Right.
And you sell that to publishers, and a publisher says, I'll take that. And they contract for that. They pay you in advance to write the book. Awesome. So back when Bob and I published The Go Giver, advances were pretty healthy. Advances started nosediving. And for about 2 years, every advance I got for a new book was half the one before.
Wow.
I mean, it was like, by the time we got to the red circle, my advance was like a tenth of what it had been for The Go Giver. And so it was a scary time to be a speculative writer, by which I mean, writing on spec, writing not knowing if anybody will buy the book, because my wife and I were like jumping into a financial hole. And it's gotten better, but it's cyclic. With the pandemic, things also crashed. So,
I would have thought that
life.
it would be you said it's not, but my brain would have said it's the opposite. When you show this amazing work of art, and now they're excited for the next one and the next one and the next one, that your advances should go up, not down. What am I missing? What math am I missing? Is it just the economy, the signs of the time? Like, did the industry completely change? Like, what happened?
The industry completely changed.
Okay.
It completely changed. For the Go Giver, we have a fantastic publishing partner. Advances for that, and the plans for that. I mean, that was consistent and steady. That didn't crash. That was awesome. But for every other book, I did a bunch of other books with a bunch of other authors, and every one, paid half of what the previous book had paid, until, as I say, with the red circle, it was Brandon and I were just jumping out of a plane at 10,000 feet, saying, "You got to shoot, I got to shoot," So yeah, it's I forget how we got there, but it is basically it's this: when you're a writer, unless you're a staff writer for a magazine, or you have some kind of salaried position, which does happen, but it's rare. If you're a writer, man, you are an entrepreneur.
Sure.
You are a person for whom, if it's to be, it's up to me, becomes a life mantra, because you're self-determining. Your product is your fortune.
Book. Yeah, your product is your book. It's whatever you put out there and wherever you put your name. But again, it just shows my ignorance, and I can't imagine I'm no different than a lot of the folks listening today. Is that I look at it as you and Bob, if you put your name on a book after selling, in this case, 1 million copies of the original book alone, when you put your name on it, publishers should be like, wow, that's gold. Like, it's ready to go. It's like Leonardo DiCaprio, splitting image you are, of course. It's like him putting his name on the movie, starring or co-starring. Like, it's just an immediate blockbuster, at least it's supposed to be. So that's where my brain goes.
Yeah, you'd think so. But, there are a few truths about publishing books. One is there are so many books out there.
Sure.
The landscape is so noisy that if you put a book out there, it's like speaking out your car window when you're going at 75 miles an hour down the highway. So if you put a book out there and say, "Hey, everybody, Bob Burg and John Mann wrote this," People are like,
Right.
oh, that's cool. And now
Right.
they're on to the next thing because
Yeah.
there's 500 books vying for Twitter, and there's Instagram.
Yeah.
And so the publishers are now feeling more like they're taking a big gamble than ever before. It probably isn't any different for angel investors in businesses or other kinds of investors in businesses. A publisher needs to be completely convinced, totally sold, that this book is going to more than pay for itself by the time it comes out.
Sure.
Otherwise, they're like, you know what? It's safer to say no than yes. The Go Giver got 22 no's, 22 rejections before Portfolio said, you know what? We want to buy that, publish that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I'd never heard that. I'm sure it's not a secret, but I'd never heard that. That's crazy. And that's a perfect life example of continuing to send it out. You know, every no leads you to that next yes, or that first yes.
Yeah, the first one. Yeah, it was, and you know, I've had other books. Well, the Red Circle, our memoir, it went out to, it got something like 18 no's. I mean, it got a lot of turn downs as well. So that's part of the entrepreneurial life.
I have a question. So you mentioned earlier, you said how your wife and yourself enjoyed The Queen's Gambit. You mentioned Shawshank, which is one of my all-time favorite movies, literally right at the top, may be the top. Over the years, and certainly now that you've written a novel, do you get inspiration to take an idea that you watch or a book you read and you say, I have an idea that I could twist that and make it my own and start and create? Like, are you now getting more inspiration than ever? Or has that not hit yet? Or
yeah, it's for me anyway, and this may be different for every writer, but for me, it isn't like I see a movie or a TV show or I read a book and say, oh, I'd like to write about that. It's more like I'll see something and it just starts some gear in the back of your mind going. You know, I'd read a couple of books. I read a book called Talking to the Dead. It's the first of what's now a good-sized crime series written by a British novelist, Harry Bingham. And it's about a woman who has this weird psychological disorder, which you don't really find out what it is at the end of the book, and that she is sort of more comfortable with dead people than she is with live. And it sounds very ghoulish, and it is kind of ghoulish, but she's a fascinating character. She's profoundly damaged. It's all told from her point of view, and your heart just aches for her, and you're fascinated by her, and you fall in love with her, and she's really weird, and she's really smart, and she's really funny. It's like, who is this person? And I remember reading that book and saying, oof, I'd love to create a character that was really screwed up, but I found really engaging and that I really wanted to root for. And that's who is in Steel Fear. That's where the guy in Steel Fear came from. It's inspired by this 5 foot tall Welsh cop, you know, who was messed up. So yeah, inspiration comes from all kinds of places.
so you're talking about Finn in that situation?
Yeah. That was like the genesis for me of Finn.
Yeah. So I know this is not even as we record this right now. This hasn't officially been released yet. It's coming out July 13th. Folks can go to your website. They can go to your website, John David Mann. But equal or even better, frankly, they can just go to steelfear.com, STEEL fear FEAR.com, and they can order a pre-copy to a pre-order. And you have a number of packages and bonuses and specials. So if you're listening to this post July 13th, 2020, thank you, or 2021, thank you for listening or watching. But I don't suspect those bonuses will be there anymore. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because they look incredible.
Yeah, sure. So the book comes out the 13th. And up until that date, if you pre-order a copy, it doesn't matter if it's audiobook, ebook, hardcover, whatever. And it's everywhere. Target, Walmart, you mentioned Amazon, Barnes & Noble, obviously, everywhere. Yep. If you do, and the link is on the site, you can go there, you can send in your proof of purchase with your name and email, and the publisher and us created a little bonus package, which is, it's got like a series of deleted scenes that part of those 50,000 words I took out, there were some like juicy pieces. I thought, man, I hate to see those go, but in the interest of pacing and and momentum in the book. We had, but a few of those we thought these are just too cool to let languish. So there's some deleted scenes and chapters that are in that package. There's a Q&A with Brandon and me. There's a sample chapter in there. There's a bunch of sort of digital extras. This Zoom background that's behind me, that file, cell phone background is there. A whole bunch of the movie trailer, which is coming out, not of the movie, but we did a 30-second movie trailer-like promo piece for Steel Fear, which is also in that package. So, a bunch of little things. There's a picture of the actual Abraham Lincoln, which Brandon served on for 6 months. That was the actual ship he was on,
wow.
Which is where the story takes place. I spent some time on that actual boat just after they had shot the new Top Gun movie. They used that ship for shooting some of that footage. I was on that ship just before it sailed out to the Gulf again, early 2019. And when I was there, the Navy gave me this photograph of the Lincoln executing a sharp turn mid-ocean to go back. It happens twice in the book where the ship makes this sharp turn to go back and look for somebody who's presumably fallen off the boat, or maybe they were pushed. We don't know. So there's that that full color photo of the ship in mid-turn, and there's a diagram and schematics of the ship, and a bunch of stuff like that. So anyway, that's there.
Neat.
And there are special events that Brandon and I will be doing, Q&As live and so forth, that happen after the release of the book. We'll also be featuring those on that website, so everybody knows where we are and what we're doing and when we're talking.
So I know you mentioned it early on when we started the interview, how this is going to be, it's already in the works to be a series of books, and hopefully even more over the years. I know this is not even out yet, but have you started writing anything yet? Is there a sketch and work? Are you 20 chapters in? Like, where are we?
Yeah, 40 chapters in. Actually, so
wow.
when you buy the book, at the back of the book, after the thing is done and you know what happened and it's all over, then it says, take a sneak peek at the next one. You're going to get 4 or 5 chapters of the next book are in the back of this book. So yeah, it's called Cold Fear. And all I can tell you is that it takes place in Iceland. And I have been furiously corresponding with a fantastic friend of mine who lives in Iceland and about details of the book. Yeah, I'm getting close to finish with that second book. You gotta be on that schedule, man, because production happens, So yeah, that book is more of the same sort of, but very different, and I'm having a blast doing it.
So I got 2 last questions that I think everybody will appreciate. Number one, because I've experienced this myself, and I don't write books. I write blogs and articles for magazines that I'm published in. What do you do if or when you have writer's block? I can't imagine in all your years that hasn't happened, where your head's not right and you can't figure out exactly what you want to say or how you say it. Yeah,
that's a great question. And I know that you ask a lot of different writers, you get a lot of different answers, and they're all good answers. James Patterson says he never has writer's block, because if he ever does, he says the answer is one word: research. And it's not just research to know details, but like if you go, I spend a lot of time, by which I mean months, maybe 6 months, researching aircraft carriers and just reading everything online I could read about it, reading books, watching documentaries, and I would bump into the weirdest stuff that would go, oh, I could use that. You don't even know what you're looking for. That's true with fiction. It's true with nonfiction. Just plunging into that world is a great way out of writer's block. But for me, here's the real answer to that. And years ago, I was writing a monthly column for a magazine, and I had 400 words. It was a lot like writing a blog post. Mm-hmm. I had this limited space to give my one idea of the month. And invariably, I'd start writing that thing like the day before it was due. And I'd work at it for a while, and I would find I had 1,200 words. It's like, it's way too much stuff, too much copy. I got to trim it down. But I couldn't trim it down. Why can't I trim it down? And I eventually learned that I was trying to jam too many pieces of fruit into this jar. I was trying to jam too many ideas. Usually I was writing about 2 or 3 ideas, when I really, if I took one idea out altogether and I just wrote about that one thing, it would be much easier. Here's my point. Often for me, writer's block, I'm stuck in a chapter, I'm stuck in a dialogue, I'm stuck in a scene. It's a question of structure. If I take a breath and step back, step away, and look at the overall picture and say, where are we going in this story? What am I saying in this blog post? What's the question I'm really asking? What's the point I really want to get across? So if I find I have a structure problem, that's why I'm stuck in a corner of this room like a ferret, trying to. So yeah, I ask myself questions. When you're stuck, ask yourself big questions.
Well, what you just said reminds me of a lot of people. They I don't know. They reference the idea of begin with the end in mind. So it sounds like for you to get out of that funk, if you will, is you have to take a step back and look at the big picture where you're trying to go. You know what it's like? It's like when you find yourself in an argument with your spouse. That never happens.
I know it never happens to you or to me, but let's just say hypothetically. And you go, and you stop and you go, wait a minute, what's really going on here?
Sure.
What's bothering me? And what you find is that there's something that's really stressing you out. It has nothing to do with the dishes or with the thing or with the whatever.
Right.
And that in fact, step back, there's something else going on. And that's the issue. That's what writer's block is like for me. I'm stuck. I'm not really stuck. What it is there's a bigger issue with my story.
I got you. Well, look, you just mentioned, and this is my last question, we'll wrap up, and all this information will be in the show notes, everybody. Go to steelfear.com. Also check out johndavidmann.com. That's man with 2 N's on the end, johndavidmann, MANN.com. But you gave us gave me, I never heard this, you gave me an Easter egg. You gave all of our listeners an Easter egg earlier. You said that there's a new Go-Giver book coming out, the Go-Giver Marriage, at some point in the near term or the future. Anything more you can share with us about that? I mean, I'm like the world's biggest Go-Giver fan. My God, I've read these all multiple times.
That does my heart good to see. I love that selection of 4. There's a 5th book coming, and it is going to be, I believe, on March 8th. We've got a date, we got a publisher, we got a manuscript. We're in production. So as I said, it's the first book I've done with my wife. And it was a blast writing. It is based.
Is she a writer?
Yeah. But this I believe will be her first published book.
Wow.
And it is a labor of love. It's a labor of collaboration. We've been talking about it for years, ever since the first Go-Giver book. Since 2008, we've been talking about this companion volume, and we finally gotten to do it. And it's based on 5 secrets of lasting love.
I like it.
Here you go.
I like it. Well, listen. Question: does Bob have anything to do with it?
Bob, right at the beginning of the process, said, "Look, guys, I can't co-author this. I've never been married. It just wouldn't feel right." And I was like, "Bob, your parents are like the most incredible marriage. You grew up, watching this incredible example of marriage. They're both still alive. Bob still lives, near them and sees them often." He said, yeah, that's all true, but I've never been married. I can't. This is not
I
gonna feel
appreciate
right.
the genuineness, though.
Yes,
his response.
It's so Bob. It is so very Bob. He's so humble. So he's not a named co-author, but you can see him. But he's been part of the process the whole way through. You can see his presence. Hovering behind every page. So and Bob and Kathy, his business partner, and Anna, my wife, and me, the 4 of us have been, the Go-Giver team for over a decade. So we're all, we're a strong team, and we're all part of the book.
So I imagine to do that, because of the name, do you have to get permission from him to use the book or to write that book or something?
Yeah, it's a really complicated process. A ton of lawyers involved, and a lot of arguments. No, it was like, "Hey, Bob, I'm doing this book." He's like, "Cool, great, of course." That's how Bob and I do contracts. Yeah,
so genuine. What did you pick a color yet? What's the color?
Haven't picked a color yet.
Looking for an exclusive.
People, feedback.
I vote orange. Just I happen to be a big Baltimore Orioles fan, so I got orange is my vote. Anyway, all right. Well, listen, it's been a blast, my friend. I really appreciate it. Probably a lot more fun for me than you. You do these a lot, particularly of late. But I'm excited. I'm going to email you when I'm done the book and tell you my thoughts. Hopefully you'll read it. And if anybody that wants to get in touch with John David Mann, listen, he's very outgoing, genuine, authentic. I never met the guy. I reached out to him on LinkedIn, mentioned that I had Bob on the show and that I've loved his books, and he was genuine and authentic, and he agreed to come on. And I had no idea you had a book going on. So it was perfect storm, perfect timing. Yeah. So everybody go to stealfear.com or johndavidmann.com. That's man with 2 N's on the end. You can find John on social media as well. Where I found him was on LinkedIn. John, any parting words before we let everybody go?
No, I guess the parting words would be, I really hope you enjoy this book. Whoever you are listening right now, you may or may not think of yourself as a crime fan, but it's funny. I just today, I don't know when this will air, but today I posted a blog post, the title of which was "A Leadership Parable Disguised as a Crime Novel," because threading through the story are leadership lessons, which is very intentional. It's like I've been writing about leadership my whole life. And so you'll find it's a crime novel. It's a serial killer novel. It's a thriller. It's also a fable about leadership. And I hope you all enjoy it.
Awesome. Well, don't be surprised if I email you, because I want you, and maybe if you're able, maybe you and Brandon on for the next book, for the next release at some point. That'd be fantastic.
Sounds excellent.
Guys, I appreciate everybody listening. Any questions, thoughts, ideas, always feel free. I love feedback. If you are on YouTube watching, fantastic. If you're on Apple Podcasts or anywhere that you consume podcasts, please, if you are so inclined, leave 5 stars. Would totally rock. For everybody behind the scenes that helps me edit and put this out every week, I'm Eric Silverman. That's my friend John David Mann. Go to stealfear.com. Get yourself a copy of Steal Fear, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the RockstarsRocking podcast. If you haven't done so already, make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you consume podcasts. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a review. 5 stars would totally rock. Until next time, Rockstars, keep rocking.